The Eastern Cape York Water Quality Program was a collaborative program aimed at reducing erosion and sediment runoff in Southeastern Cape York catchments. It was an exciting program to be a part of, working in one of the more remote regions of Australia and tackling challenging water quality issues. Over 100 people across 8 projects were involved, including 3 local conservation organisations, Cookshire Council, CSIRO, JCU Trotwater, and more than 12 traditional owner groups. Over 4 years, we worked to monitor sediment loads, control gully erosion, reduce wildfires, and fix major roads and tracks to reduce sediment runoff to the Great Barrier Reef.
Water is life. If you don't have water, there is no life. Water is everything. You need water for our daily activities, for industry to survive. So water today is very important, but culturally, water contains our stories. It's the landscape that defines who you are and where you come from, where your bloodline is.
4 organisations led 8 separate projects, addressing the main sources of erosion across southeastern Cape York.
We needed a regional scale program to get great results. It was just such an excellent opportunity for a lot of organisations that have all been doing this work to come together to develop a series of projects that all complement each other really well, all with that main aim of reducing fine sediment to the Great Barrier Reef.
3 fire management projects worked with traditional owners and landowners to develop fire management plans, undertake training in fire management, and conduct controlled early dry season burns to avoid the more intense and destructive late dry season wildfires.
To improve water quality through fire management relies on one main factor, and that's ground cover. The idea of this project was to preserve as much ground cover as we could across all our project areas by the end of the wet season.
When the wet season starts, we get really heavy wet season rains, and if you've got bare earth, you get a large amount of sediment coming off that bare earth. The idea is to try and maximise the amount of vegetation cover at the start of the wet season by doing good management of fire to stop really large-scale fires going across the landscape.
Because of the fire management that we do, it's over the 5 years that I've been here, the regrowth in the trees and the shrubs and just the general bush in itself is far more stabilised.
The fire management is a very important thing to be continued. Right now we've left our project partners in a pretty good place to continue this SNP, but it's really up to a lot of them to take this on board, keep working with their neighbours.
The 3-year plan that was devised for the project has been adopted by Queensland Fire Department and Rural Fire Service as a high priority to deliver. So that will continue to be delivered even after the life of the project, which is really exciting. The other thing that will continue is that the firefighters and the landholders have learnt so much in the last 3 years about how to manage wildfire in their country.
In addition to the fire projects, a number of projects focused on reducing erosion from gullies, unsealed council roads, and primitive tracks. These projects focused on priority erosion-prone areas, particularly in the Annan catchment. The Gully Erosion Control Project remediated 6 large gullies in the Annan catchment, stopping 1,000 tonnes of sediment from flowing to the reef each year.
Predominantly there, the gully erosion project's working in the Annan catchment, and specifically in the Annan and the Oakey Creek catchment. That's a hot spot of gully erosion where there's lots of erodible soils. But we had a gully here that we refilled and then smoothed back over. The gully there, and then that ripped apart too. So these are areas that we put rock mulch in on the steeper slopes.
The Primitive Tracks project focused on mapping erosion hotspots and implementing erosion controls along dirt tracks outside of the main road network.
Two sub-projects. One was trying to map all the erosion that we can find along primitive tracks across southeastern Cape York. And the other part of the project was actually trying and implementing erosion control practices using best management practices at pilot sites for different road segments for these primitive tracks.
The Council Roads project trialled different methods of maintaining unsealed council roads.
Cooperation between the water partnerships and Cookshire was to actually gather data on future road construction techniques that will minimise the fine runoff that is actually doing the most damage onto the reef.
The biggest challenge is that we had a major flood, a 500-year flood, in the middle of the Council Unsealed Road project. And which was interesting is that the flood happened after we installed a lot of these best management practices, and most of them held up really, really well, and they demonstrated how we can make these roads more resilient to these big floods.
So this project's worked with amazing technology to really get down to the nitty-gritty. We can now quantify to the millimetre how much soil, how much fine sediment we're losing from these roads.
So the other thing that we've done with this project is created some best management practice guidelines, both for Cookshire potentially to use, but also we're working with the Local Government Association of Queensland, LGAQ, to create some statewide guidelines for erosion reduction along unsealed roads.
Another terrific outcome is the best management practices that have been developed, and that gives a guideline for everyone to follow then, be it the TMR or Cookshire Council. Those best management practices should be embedded forevermore, and that would be a massive win.
These practices that South Cape Catchments and Water Partnership are trying to put forward and have done, and that's starting to get council on board, they need to be done across the board with everyone. I think every contractor should get on board with that, really, because everyone loves the reef.
Not only will the outcome be great for erosion control, but also the roads will be better formed. These are major transport routes, for cattle, tourism, everything. They get a better road surface too. The supplies in the wet season are much easier. All that stuff, everyone wins from this.
The cost-benefit analysis showed that the business as usual scenario was the most costly at a 30-year timescale, and that if we had alternative practices like vegetation management or betterments for erosion control or bitumen dust sealing, over 30 years we saved quite a bit of funding and money over those 30-year periods.
The money is there. They don't even need more money. All we have to do is focus that money, and we can have a huge win.
The monitoring project monitored water quality and sediment loads from the Annan River to Cape Melville. Seagrass meadows were mapped and monitored along the coast, and wetland condition assessments were conducted at significant wetlands.
It's important to work in this region because not a lot is known about the condition of the aquatic ecosystems. We don't have much data about the volumes of sediment flowing out to the reef. We haven't had a lot of historic monitoring of the seagrass meadows, and so there's a lot of unknown. We've had turbidity data loggers installed in each of the river systems, monitoring every 10 minutes how dirty the water is and also how much water is flowing past. And then using that information, we can calculate the total loads or the total volumes of sediment that are flowing out to the reef. We are also monitoring in some of the tributaries of each of the rivers so that we can identify where the sediment is coming from throughout the catchment, which then helps us to guide the management actions and prioritize where these erosion management activities need to focus.
This part of Southeast Cape York has a high connectivity to local reefs and local seagrass meadows, so these catchments are fairly short and steep with generally higher rainfall than inland, and they produce a lot of runoff going to these coastal ecosystems that are really valuable and important.
we were able to gather an enormous amount of information and fill in a lot of data gaps. We now have very much improved estimates of sediment loads flowing out to the reef from these different river systems. We now have current extents of seagrass meadows. We were able to monitor the changes in a lot of these ecosystems over the course of Cyclone Jasper, which drastically transformed our rivers, drastically increased sediment loads going out to the reef, and wiped out a lot of seagrass meadows. So we've been able to get baseline condition, but also to capture some of the changes that are occurring. By being able to show the actual volumes of sediment, we can use our data to inform the models and then hopefully to inform the sediment reduction targets, which are then used to guide the investment and hopefully to determine that Cape York should actually be a higher priority for investing in protecting and improving water quality.
One of the most significant legacies of this program has been the huge local capacity that we've seen built up over the last 3 years. Traditional owner groups that can now manage their own fire programs, local employees who are now skilled in GIS and water quality monitoring and fire management and all sorts of skills that we've always struggled to find people from outside the area. So instead, it made so much more sense to invest in our local people who are interested and passionate and invested in this region. And that will be the lasting legacy. It's, even if funding is not available, at least we'll know that we've got local people here who can do the work when we do find the funding again.
It's also given our local people in the communities to be taught to work in partnerships with our scientists, and they're building up their knowledge of how they can do things better when they return to country.
With the erosion around Cook Dam, the tracks and that, what I did with the work up north was pretty good. The track erosion, I learned a lot about that, and the gullies gave me an experience what happens to the gullies and that where the erosion, where it ends up in the water system, and learning a lot.
It's been a fantastic partnership with a whole lot of people coming together, all united in trying to do good things for the Barrier Reef.
We couldn't have had the success of this program without the partnerships that we had, working together with the local councils, traditional owner groups, landholders, QPWS, and many others allowed us to share resources and costs, manage the logistics, and to respect the cultural heritage and traditional knowledge of the landscape. As I see it, there are two possible paths for the future of Cape York. One, we can maintain the status quo, continue to develop roads and tracks, and allow wildfires to ravage the landscape every year, and the landscape will continue to degrade. Or we can see the adoption of best management practices for fire management, adequately funded across the Cape for roads and tracks that are maintained with erosion control in mind, and feral animal and weed control is adequately invested in, and we can maintain the incredible environment that Cape York is known for.